This admiral led British naval forces to victory during the Falklands War. From the flagship HMS Hermes, he commanded his carrier battle group, overcoming harsh seas, hostile skies, and a constant threat of Argentine attack. Today, we're looking at the life, campaigns, and most importantly, the medals of steely-eyed submariner Sandy Woodward. Woodward's ribbons show 2 decorations for distinguished service, 1 campaign or service award with rosette, and 1 commemorative medal. You might question why such a senior and accomplished military commander has so few awards. We will find out why later on in the video. So who was this Royal Navy Admiral who would go on to lead a carrier battle group to the Falklands and pave the way for a successful reconquest of the islands? A Cornishman, John Forster Sandy Woodward, was born near Penzance in May 1932. His father, a veteran of the trenches in World War I, had a modest banking career as head cashier at a local Barclays bank. As a child, Woodward was sent to prep school in Stubbington in Hampshire. One of 3 siblings, his parents struggled to pay for their education. With money tight and finding out the Royal Navy provided scholarships, Woodward applied and was accepted to Britannia Royal Naval College in Dartmouth at the age of 13 in January 1946. Speaking of his time at the college and subsequent career, Woodward described himself as unambitious. I never once in my career spent one moment plotting or planning the best way of being appointed to the board of the Admiralty, which was just as well since I never made it. As a pupil, Woodward graduated at the end of 1949, passing out 8th out of 44 in his class. Of those 44 students, 3 would become admirals. Speaking of his competitive prowess, or lack of at the time, he stated, "I failed to win anything in that whole time. No academic prizes, no sporting colours, not even my house colours, normally awarded for being public-spirited during one's last term. It ranked me as a truly exemplary body of non-achievement, having not earned any prize from between the age of 7 and a knighthood at the age of 50. In 1950, he joined the 10,000-ton 3-funnelled training cruiser HMS Devonshire as a cadet, sailing to the West Indies and North Atlantic. The cadets would spend half their time working as naval seamen and the other half spent in a professional development programme. At first, Woodward struggled to understand the whistles and bugles of the ship's public address system, called pipes, as well as the nautical jargon known as jack-speak. Seemingly, having lots of shipmates from the Tyne and Weir, he described jack-speak as distorted spoken words, possibly disguised in that northeast version of English known as Geordie. Woodward stated that during that time he not only discovered the workings of a ship and its people, but also how to idle, how to look busy, and how to avoid the dirty jobs. As a future officer, this gave him a comparative advantage in being able to identify later the work-shy and the slackers, as he knew all the tricks of the trade. Given the rank of midshipman aged 18, Woodward was given his first assignment and sent to HMS Maidstone, a submarine depot ship based in Portsmouth. The fact that I had not been sent to a cruiser, nor a battleship, nor even an aircraft carrier, but to a depot ship, was a fairly clear indicator that I was regarded as anything but a high achiever. After 10 months or so learning logistics on the depot ship, he was reassigned to HMS Sheffield, a 10,000-ton cruiser just coming out of refit. His pop star wages as a midshipman were a whopping £10 a month. So this is what the princely sum of £10 buys me in London today. Woodward came to find Morale on the ship was low. Many of the crew had been through World War II, and after the highs and lows of the conflict, they were now, in peacetime, demotivated. After the emotional rollercoaster ride of World War II, some veterans found peacetime life boring. Others still suffered from forms of PTSD from the war. It was a matter of luck for a young midshipman to find himself on a ship with really high-quality officers. In the autumn of 1951, he was posted to HMS Zodiac, a destroyer based in Portland with the training squadron. This squadron would conduct what was to become known as the Thursday War, weekly war fighting and damage control exercises with the main fleet. Woodward was then finally commissioned as a sub-lieutenant in 1952. He would be sent to the Royal Naval College in Greenwich on the Junior Officers War Course. We were taught how to organise our logic processes on military subjects and put them down on paper. I see books appearing in the United States these days, hailed as the greatest breakthroughs in management thinking since Sun Tzu, which simply paraphrase the Navy Staff Handbook of that time. During his period at the college, an inter-service beef kicked off with the Army. Woodward had observed that being educated in the regal surroundings of Greenwich Naval College made the Navy realise we were a vastly more civilised, educated and organised group than officers of the Army could ever be. And Woodward and his cohorts would set out to prove it. Out of class, Woodward and his gaggle of officers conducted a raid on the Army Military Academy at Sandhurst. Finding a way through security, they drove cars over the Army's hallowed gravel parade ground, carving deep ruts, whitewashed statues of generals, and trailed toilet rolls all over the place. This enraged the training staff at Sandhurst, who passed the message on to the naval leadership at Greenwich. When all the officers were mustered for the mother of all bollockings, future Rear Admiral Sir Anthony Myers, who gave the dressing down, was a submariner who'd earned the Victoria Cross in World War II. Berating them for their conduct, he finished, "It was thoroughly disgraceful behaviour. Well done." Finishing technical courses in Portsmouth, Woodward was asked what branch he would like to specialise for example, communications, gunnery or aviation. He made the schoolboy error of saying he didn't know. He recalled, "I received a letter telling me to report to HMS Dolphin, the alma mater of the dreaded submariners. I had been volunteered for the submarine service." Although clearly a reluctant recruit to the submarine service, Woodward, like every other newly qualified submariner, would have naturally noticed three significant changes upon receiving his dolphins. Firstly, his extra submarine pay would have allowed him to flash the cash. Secondly, he would have developed a cocksure swagger like all submariners do. And thirdly, would now seem irresistible to the ladies. Although considering himself a pressed man, his submarine career would span 32 years. After 4 months submarine training, he was sent to his first submarine or boat, HMS Sanguine. Sanguine, an S-class submarine and part of the first submarine squadron, was based in Malta. At the time, Malta acted as the main base for the Royal Navy within the Mediterranean, until around the 1970s. Interestingly, as an aside, there is still a famous Royal Navy themed bar there called The Pub, where in 1999 the Hollywood actor Oliver Reed had his last drink and collapsed there during a drinking bout with Royal Navy sailors. Woodward would spend 2 years with Sanguine and learn his trade as a junior submarine officer. Around this time, he was promoted to lieutenant. After, he would then get a 4-year posting to HMS Porpoise, joining the crew as it was being built in Barrow-in-Furness in 1956. In 1960, he got married to Charlotte and settled in Gosport. They would have 2 children. Now relishing his role as a submariner, Woodward passed the infamous Submarine Commanding Officers Qualifying course, known as Perisher, where around a quarter of students fail. One of the Navy's toughest exams, Woodward credited his passing of it by having had excellent mentorship under Porpoise's commander, Brian Hutchins, who had taught him hard self-confidence and to be rather less concerned for the feelings of others whenever he saw clearly the way forward. Woodward said, and I quote, "This, of course, does have the effect of converting one into a pushy bastard. But that's the risk you take. Woodward, as a lieutenant of 6 years seniority, was placed in command of HMS Hermes, a diesel-electric boat, for 2 years, patrolling home waters, and then sent for a year-long nuclear reactor course back again at Greenwich Naval College in 1963. In this period, Woodward would witness major changes in the armed forces. During the 1960s and 70s, the Royal Navy would undergo enormous restructuring. It would pivot from a global imperial-focused power at the beginning of the 1960s to, by the end of the 1970s, a smaller regional NATO Navy, focused on the North Atlantic and Soviet threat. As an example, in 1965, the Royal Navy had around 100,000 active service members and included 4 large aircraft carriers, 2 amphibious platforms, up to 15 destroyers and 40 frigates, not to mention numerous submarines. This had roughly shrunk by a third or so by 1980, with the 1966 Defence White Paper Review and the British withdrawal of forces east of Suez instigating much of this change. Regaining his sea legs, Woodward then spent time as the XO of HMS Valiant, the first British nuclear attack sub. The boat conducted numerous sea trials and even conducted a trip from Scotland to Singapore fully underwater. Then 2 years as a parachute instructor. Clearly now, having done more sea time than Poseidon, Captain Birdseye and the Little Mermaid combined, Woodward was given his first nuclear command, HMS Warspite. On joining his boat as the new commanding officer, Woodward sensed low morale. The boat had been in a collision 12 months before with an iceberg, and many of the crew hadn't got over it. Immediately after the incident, 24 members of the crew had even asked to leave the boat, traumatised by it. Since the accident, the previous commander of the boat hadn't manoeuvred the submarine vigorously to spare the crew. As the new commanding officer, Woodward wasn't happy, stating he had a different view of command, and decided for a full week to intensively throw the boat about, known as angles and dangles, to get the crew used to it again. This shock therapy worked, and overall the crew were restored. During his varied career on boats, in the midst of the Cold War, no doubt Woodward would have completed many covert missions. So why no medals for this, you ask? Submarine missions are often classified, especially during the Cold War and even today. Many operations, such as intelligence gathering or deterrent patrols, don't get public recognition or can't be officially acknowledged at the time. If not recognised officially, then no campaign or service medal can be issued. When awards are given for submarine missions, they often come as long service decorations or high-level honours, such as an OBE. Going about their business with little recognition or fanfare is why the submarine service is called the silent service. In early 1972, Woodward was recalled to land and sent for a few months to the Royal College of Defence Studies, where basically he, along with 4 other similar grade officers, were given administrator roles and essentially used as gophers, acting, as he recalled, a general Mr. Fix-It and a London tour guide to visiting students. A thruster and man of action, Woodward took a very poor view of the job, which entailed menial tasks, barring actually sweeping the floor, in his own words. He stated, "I was also expected to be civil to brigadiers, who were not being very civil to me, and see to the minor needs of any student who thought he might have a problem." Fortunately, this posting wouldn't last too long. In the summer of 1972, Woodward was promoted to captain and assigned to the Ministry of Defence at Whitehall as an assistant director in the Directorate of Naval Plans. More accustomed to driving nuclear submarines than pen-pushing with a bunch of civil servants, he feared it would be dull and tedious. However, he was involved deeply in planning, finding the work surprisingly interesting. However, he did get off to a bad start. As I walked out of the building at the end of my first day, I had by no means found my feet. I was in the company of an RAF group captain, but when I wished him good evening and prepared to walk across the footway on Hungerford Bridge back to Waterloo Station, he seemed quite taken aback. "Not Hungerford Bridge, old chap. That's known as the Other Ranks Bridge. We officers use Westminster Bridge." Bit bizarre. Assisting his seniors, he would work on the 1973 Defence Review, attempting to fight the Navy's corner. In 1974, he became Captain Submarine Sea Training, and in 1976 took his first surface command, a brand new Type 42 destroyer, HMS Sheffield, which gave him insight into commanding surface operations, although the ship had many teething issues and defects, including trialling the new Sea Dart missile system. This experience would prove invaluable in the years to come. On the 7th of July 1981, Woodward was promoted to Rear Admiral and took command of the 1st Flotilla, a key naval formation. Displaying his tactical acumen during one exercise with the American 5th Fleet in the Indian Ocean, Woodward disguised his flagship as a cruise liner, the Rawalpindi. Glamming his ship up in bright lights, he managed to get in amongst the US carrier group and sink the USS Coral Sea with 4 simulated Exocet missiles. The experience gave him valuable insight commanding multiple platforms and understanding the practicalities of naval warfare at a strategic level. When Argentinian forces invaded the Falkland Islands on the 2nd of April 1982, Woodward was earmarked to command the carrier battle group with HMS Hermes as his flagship. Working with him would be Commodore Mike Clapp from the Amphibious Task Force and Royal Marine Brigadier Julian Thompson, commanding 3 Commando Brigade, the initial landing force. In overall command at HQ in Northwood, London, was Admiral Sir John Fieldhouse. The task force spent time at Ascension Island, getting to grips with huge logistical challenges and working out the command structures. During this preparation period and in the lead up to the landings, the 3 leaders from different service backgrounds would clash over conflicting operational priorities, differing views on risk tolerance, and different leadership styles. An ambiguous command structure only added fuel to the fire. With Woodward being a submariner, Commodore Clapp being an aviator in general service, and Brigadier Thompson being a Royal Marine, naturally their outlook and perspectives would be slightly different. This reminds me of the saying, a submariner, a skimmer, and a bootneck walk into a bar. The bartender looks up and says, "Is this a joke or a joint operation?" However, the 3 commanders, in the best traditions of the British Armed Forces, worked through their differences to achieve surprise and success with the landings at San Carlos Water. During this crucial time, the Royal Navy provided protection for the amphibious group and suffered continual attacks from the Argentinian Air Force. Woodward's excellent book, 100 Days, drills into the detail of this as well. In fact, all 3 men wrote books on their Falklands experience, which can be found on Amazon. For the sake of time, I won't go into detail regarding the campaign, as I'm tempted to look at the naval aspect in the future, and we've touched on certain areas in earlier videos, such as the Belgrano and Goose Green. Speaking of naval warfare, Woodward observed, unlike other military commanders, the captain battles alongside of all of his senior officers, his junior officers, chief petty officers, and the ship's company, including laundryman and NAFI canteen manager. They face the enemy as a fighting force, with no one more exposed than anyone else. Those who command ships in the Royal Navy do not send anyone anywhere. They all go together. Woodward has been described as abrasive, but that's a little unfair in my opinion. As commander of a carrier battle group, he had to take some of the biggest risks that no British military commander in recent decades had ever had, and all under the intense scrutiny of the modern media. Furthermore, although clearly a courageous and decisive leader, I get the impression from reading his memoirs, his personality is naturally unassuming and modest, and that, as a man used to conducting his business in the shadowy, insular and unrecognised world of the submarine service, he was not accustomed to the sudden lavish publicity spotlight placed on him. Brigadier, later Major General Sir Julian Thompson, said this of Woodward. He was quite a tricky guy. He was very clever, a bit schoolmasterly at times. He was not an easy person to get on with, but I admired him enormously. He was highly courageous, very cool, he was very brave, and he did the right thing. Woodward recalled when he returned to the UK, one of the first official letters he received was from the Director of Naval Pay and Pensions, mailed to him 5 days before he returned from the South. It stated that they had reduced his entertainment allowance and that he now owed them £649.70 in back payments after overpaying him. What a homecoming. In 1983, he was appointed Flag Officer Submarines and NATO Commander Submarines, Eastern Atlantic. He was promoted to Vice Admiral in 1984, and the following year became Deputy Chief of Defence Staff. In 1987, he was promoted to Admiral and served as both Commander-in-Chief, Naval Home Command, and Flag ADC to the Queen. He retired from the Royal Navy in 1989. His medals are Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath, awarded after his victory in the Falklands in 1982, Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the British Empire, Military Division, awarded on his retirement in 1989, South Atlantic Campaign Medal with Rosette, and a Queen Elizabeth II Jubilee Medal. I've also included here Woodward's Submariner's Gold Dolphins, which likely represent more covert missions and tasks that he successfully accomplished. I would imagine he would be just as proud of these dolphins as the rest of his awards. Speaking in the years after the Falklands, Woodward stated, "Often one heard about how much worse it was in Ulster, Malaya, Korea, Kenya and so on. The difference was that in the Falklands we lost 250 men in 6 weeks flat, not over a period of years. During that time I lost nearly half of the destroyers and frigates I started with. The killing was at a particularly high rate, more than 10 times worse than anything our services had to take since the Second World War." Importantly, during this period of the Cold War, to the Soviet Union, who had dismissed the British and wrote them off, the Falklands War demonstrated that Britain, if seriously challenged, could fight fiercely under bloody conditions, and was also prepared to accept substantial losses in men and equipment. In retirement, he would speak out against defence cuts and advocate for the future continual defence of the Falkland Islands. Admiral Sir John Sandy Woodward passed away in 2013, aged 81. He would be remembered as a highly capable fighting admiral whose inspirational leadership was pivotal to the successful liberation of the Falklands. In all honesty, I could have spoken for another 20 or 30 minutes just on the Falklands War itself, but for the sake of brevity and time and the fact that I might cover this in the future, I will leave it for now. Thanks for watching. I hope you found some value from this, and I'll see you in the next one.